The air was thick with smoke and the stench of blood. The sound of chains dragging against metal echoed in the dark hall. It was not a factory for animals. It was worse. It was a slaughterhouse for living, thinking beings. Humans had only heard whispers about such places. But James, a stranded soldier, had walked into one by accident. His ship had crashed on this barren alien moon. His comms were dead, and while searching for shelter, he stumbled through rusted gates into a place that felt cursed. Rows of cages lined the walls. Some cages held strange creatures, half-starved. Shaking, their eyes hollow, others were already empty, leaving only claw marks and stains that told the story of what had happened to those unlucky before. The flickering red lights above made shadows dance across the damp floor. James's boots splashed in a pool of dark liquid. He looked down, knowing well what it was. He tightened his jaw. His training told him to stay alert. But his gut told him something was very wrong here. This was not a place anyone should ever enter. A weak voice broke the silence. At first, James thought he imagined it. But then it came again, trembling, desperate. "Please, use me, hurt me. Just don't leave me here." James spun around. His rifle came up instinctively. His eyes scanned the cages until he found her. Inside a narrow cage curled into herself was a girl. She was not human. Her skin was pale blue. Like ice touched by moonlight, her eyes were large, glowing faintly even in the dark. Chains bound her wrists and bruises painted her arms. She looked fragile, broken. Yet her voice carried something more than pain. It carried pure fear of being abandoned. James froze. His mind raced. Why would she beg like this? Most prisoners would ask for freedom, for mercy. But this alien girl was begging him to use her, to hurt her. As long as he didn't leave her in this nightmare. He lowered his weapon slowly. "I'm not here to hurt you," he whispered. But his voice echoed through the metal hall. The girl shook her head, pressing her face against the cage bars. No. Don't lie to me, humans, monsters. I know, but if you go, they'll come back. They'll take me again, tear me apart piece by piece, please. Stay." James swallowed hard. His heart pounded against his chest. He wasn't prepared for this. He had fought in wars, seen men die, but this was different. This was a soul begging not for life, but for presence. He crouched low, his eyes meeting hers through the bars. "What do they do here?" he asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted the answer. She trembled, her chains rattling. "They sell us, cut us, break us. Some are forced to fight beasts. Some are drained of blood for experiments. Some are—" She stopped, her voice cracking. Her eyes filled with tears that glistened against her strange glowing irises. "I was supposed to be taken yesterday. But they forgot me. They'll remember soon. They'll come." As if on cue, heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. James snapped his head toward the sound. He could see shadows moving, bulky figures with weapons in hand. Guards. His instincts screamed at him, "Leave now, find an exit." But the girl's trembling hand reached through the bars, her chains clinking as she whispered again, "Please, don't leave me, take me, even if it's just to hurt me. Anything is better than them." James clenched his jaw. His training had drilled choices into him. Survive, escape, report back. But his humanity whispered something else. This girl had already lost everything. She wasn't asking to be saved like a hero in stories. She was just asking not to die alone in the dark. The footsteps grew louder. The guards' voices barked orders in a guttural alien tongue. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. They were searching, hunting. James scanned the cage quickly. His soldier's eyes looked for weaknesses. The lock was old, rusted. It wouldn't take much. He pulled a small knife from his belt and jammed it into the mechanism. The metal screeched, sparks flew, and the lock snapped open. The girl gasped, her eyes wide. You're letting me out?" "No time to argue," James muttered. Pulling the door wide, he grabbed her hand and pulled. Her body was weak, trembling. She stumbled but tried to keep pace with him. Behind them, a guard's voice roared, followed by the thud of boots charging forward. James raised his rifle and fired. The blast lit the hall. One guard fell, the others shouted in rage. The girl cried out in fear, covering her ears. But James dragged her toward the far end of the slaughterhouse. Alarms blared, red lights spinning across the walls. Metal doors slammed shut one after another, trapping them deeper inside. The girl's voice shook as she whispered, "You should have left me. They will never stop." James glanced at her, his jaw tight. "I don't leave people behind," he said firmly. Even if she wasn't human, but in his mind, one thought burned. What kind of hell have I just walked into? The slaughterhouse had come alive around them. Alarms wailing, guards screaming, creatures rattling their cages in panic. And in the center of it all, James with his rifle and the alien girl clinging to his arm, begging not to be abandoned again, and somewhere deep inside, James knew this was only the beginning. James pushed forward through the twisting corridors, dragging the frail alien girl beside him. The alarms screamed louder with every step. Red lights flashed across the metal walls. Each pulse of light reminded him of a heartbeat, fast, panicked, desperate. Behind them, the stomping of heavy boots echoed closer. The guards were not giving up. They shouted in their harsh alien language, the sound bouncing off the iron walls like war drums. James's mind raced. He had two clear choices: abandon the girl and save himself, or risk everything by dragging her along. His training shouted the answer: mission first, survival first. Yet when he looked at the girl's trembling form, her glowing eyes filled with terror, he couldn't force himself to let go. She stumbled as they ran, her chains clinking with each movement. "They will catch us," she whispered breathlessly. "They always catch us, no one escapes, not ever." "Then today is different," James muttered, keeping his grip tight on her wrist. They turned into a large hall, lined with cages stacked 3 stories high. Inside the cages, dozens of creatures stirred. Some hissed, some cried, some stretched their weak arms through the bars, begging silently for release. The sight burned into James's mind. This was not just a slaughterhouse. It was a nightmare factory. The girl looked at the others with guilt. "If you save me, they will suffer worse. The masters punish everyone when even one escapes." Her words hit him like a punch. James slowed, his boots scraping against the rusted floor. What was he doing? He wasn't on a rescue mission. He wasn't equipped for this. He had no backup, no exit plan, for a moment. He thought about letting her go. He imagined the report: crash-landed, infiltrated hostile zone, witnessed atrocities but escaped alive. Command would understand, they always did. But then the girl's words echoed again in his mind. "Please, don't leave me here," he cursed under his breath, running a hand over his sweat-soaked forehead. "Why me? Why now?" he whispered to himself. The girl tilted her head, confusion flickering across her bruised face. "Because you came," she said simply. "No one else comes. Only buyers, only guards. You came?" Her words were too simple, yet they carried weight. James felt a strange heaviness press on his chest. She wasn't asking him to be a hero. She wasn't even asking him to win. She was asking him to stay. A sudden blast shook the floor. Sparks rained from the ceiling as a reinforced door at the far end of the hall slid open. More guards stormed in, their armor gleaming under the crimson lights. James raised his rifle, firing quick bursts. The recoil jolted through his shoulder. 2 guards fell, but 3 more rushed forward. The girl cried out and hid behind him. "Stay low," he barked, pressing her against the cage wall. He pulled a smoke canister from his vest and slammed it on the floor. Thick gray clouds swallowed the hall. The screams of confused guards echoed in the haze. James grabbed the girl again and pulled her through the smoke. Coughing, his eyes watered, his lungs burned, but he didn't stop. They burst through another side corridor. Stumbling into silence, here the alarms didn't reach. The only sound was their heavy breathing. The girl looked at him with wide eyes. "Why risk this?" "You don't even know me. You don't even know my name." James leaned against the wall. Wiping grime from his face, his voice was low, rough. "Because leaving you behind would make me no different from them." Her lips trembled. And for the first time, she didn't look like a broken prisoner. She looked like someone who had been seen, someone who mattered. But James knew the truth. He couldn't save everyone here. Not with one rifle, not with his limited ammo. He had to make a choice, and that choice would haunt him forever. He whispered more to himself than to her. "This isn't a rescue mission, it's survival. But if survival means leaving you, then maybe I don't want to survive that way." For a long moment, they stayed in the dim corridor, the girl staring at him as if he had just spoken a foreign truth. Finally, she said, "My name is Lyra." James blinked, taken off guard by the sudden introduction. "Lyra," he repeated softly, tasting the word like it was forbidden. She nodded weakly. "If we die, at least you know who I was." James looked at her, and for the first time since entering the slaughterhouse, he felt something more than fear. He felt responsibility. But responsibility came with a price. The guards would not stop, the alarms would not end. The slaughterhouse itself seemed alive. shifting, locking doors, forcing them deeper. James gripped his rifle tighter, his jaw set. He had made his choice. The dilemma was no longer survival versus escape. Now it was survival together, even if it meant walking deeper into hell. The smoke of the last fight still clung to James's clothes. His lungs burned, his ears rang from the sound of gunfire. But he kept moving, dragging the girl with him. Her steps were weak, her chains still heavy. But her eyes, those glowing eyes, watched him with something new. Not just fear, but a fragile hope. They stopped in a dark storage chamber, far from the main halls. James kicked the door shut and pressed his ear against it. Silence for the moment. They were safe. The girl slumped against the wall, her chest rising and falling fast. James crouched in front of her. "You need to tell me everything," he said quietly. "What is this place? Who runs it? And why are you here?" She hesitated, her lips trembling, as if speaking the truth was more dangerous than the guards outside. Finally, she whispered, "This is not just a slaughterhouse, it is a market. A place where lives are sold and tested like toys. Where screams are music to the masters." James's jaw tightened. "And you? Why you?" Her glowing eyes lowered. "Because I am not just anyone, my name is Lyra. Daughter of the House Vera." James frowned. The name meant nothing to him. But the way she said it, the weight in her tone, told him it was important. "My family was noble," she continued, her voice shaking. "We ruled a city of towers on the water. Our crest flew on every banner. I was the jewel they showed to the people, but my family—" She paused, her throat tightening. "They betrayed me," James blinked. "Your own family?" Lyra's hands curled into fists, the chains clinking. "To keep their power, they gave me to the collectors. They said one daughter was worth less than the safety of their throne. They let me be dragged here like an animal." Her words hung in the air like poison. James had seen betrayal before, men leaving comrades behind in war, but this was worse. This was blood betraying blood. Lyra looked up, her glowing eyes wet with tears. "At first, I begged for freedom. I cried for mercy, but they laughed. The guards broke me until I stopped asking, until I thought no one would ever hear me again. That is why I begged you not to leave me, even hurt, even used. It would mean I was not forgotten." James felt something heavy press in his chest. He had walked into this nightmare by accident, but now he understood the truth. This girl wasn't just a victim. She was a symbol, a living reminder of how deep cruelty could run. Before he could answer, a loud clatter echoed outside the storage chamber. James raised his rifle, his muscles tense. Lyra flinched, pressing against the wall, but no guards burst through. Instead, a weak metallic groan filled the room. James turned and noticed a grate in the floor. It shifted slightly as if something below was moving it. He knelt, pulling the cover aside. Beneath was a tunnel, narrow and dark. The stench rising from it made his stomach twist, but it was a way out. Lyra shook her head quickly. "No, not there. The tunnels are where they throw the failed ones. The broken ones. It's worse than death." James stared into the black hole. He believed her. He could almost feel the suffering below. But they didn't have time to be picky. The guards would sweep this area soon. "We don't have a choice," he said firmly. "Either we fight 100 guards, or we crawl through this and find another way." Lyra's lips quivered. She wanted to refuse, but she remembered the beast-like guards, the cages, the endless screams. Slowly she nodded. James climbed down first, his boots sinking into the damp floor. He lifted his rifle, scanning the tunnel with his light. Shadows stretched in every direction. He extended his hand upward. "Come on." Lyra grabbed his hand and lowered herself down. Her chains rattled against the metal ladder. Her glowing eyes darted left and right. "They will know," she whispered. "The masters always know." James pulled her close as they began walking. "Then let them come," he muttered. "They'll learn humans don't scare so easy." As they walked deeper, the tunnel walls told their own story. Scratches carved by claws, faint stains that looked far too much like blood, bones scattered in the corners. Lyra trembled, whispering prayers in a tongue James didn't understand. And then from the darkness ahead came a sound, a low growl, wet and heavy. It was not a guard, not a human sound at all. James raised his weapon, his finger on the trigger. His heart pounded. He had chosen this path. But the question clawed at his mind. Had he chosen right? Lyra gripped his arm tight, her voice almost breaking. "I told you, this place is worse than death. The growl grew louder, closer, until two glowing shapes appeared in the shadows ahead. Eyes. Hungry and watching, James pulled Lyra behind him, aiming into the black whatever secrets this girl carried. Whatever betrayal she had suffered, none of it would matter if they didn't survive the next few minutes. And in that moment, the slaughterhouse didn't feel like a building anymore. It felt alive, a beast itself, and they were trapped inside its belly. The growl in the tunnel shook the air like thunder. James tightened his grip on the rifle, pulling Lyra behind him. Two glowing eyes blinked in the dark. Then another pair opened beside them. Then another. 3 sets of eyes watched. Low to the ground, hungry and waiting, Lyra's breath came in short gasps. "The reject beasts," she whispered. "They feed them with those who fail the tests. They will not stop." James steadied his rifle. "Then they picked the wrong meal tonight." The first beast lunged, its claws scraping sparks against the tunnel walls. James fired. The muzzle flash lit the darkness. The beast screamed and crashed into the floor. But the other 2 charged, snarling, saliva dripping from jagged teeth. "Move!" James shouted. He shoved Lyra forward down the tunnel. The walls rattled as the creatures slammed behind them, chasing. The tunnel twisted sharply, forcing them to sprint over rusted grates and broken bones. James fired another shot, but the tunnel was too narrow. The blast only slowed the creatures for seconds. Lyra stumbled, her chains clinking as she nearly fell. James grabbed her arm, pulling her upright. "Keep running." Behind them, the beasts roared, their claws tore into the floor, leaving deep grooves in the metal. The sound of their pursuit grew louder, closer. Finally, the tunnel split into 2 paths, one sloping upward toward a faint red glow, the other sinking deeper into black. "Which way?" James barked. Lyra pointed upward, panic in her eyes. "The red glow, it leads back to the slaughter pits, but maybe we can find an exit there." James didn't like the sound of slaughter pits, but the beasts were too close. He pulled her up the slope, their boots scraping against the rust. The growls behind them turned into a frenzy. The creatures slammed against the walls, gaining speed. James turned and tossed a small explosive. It clattered against the ground, then erupted in a flash. The tunnel shook, dust and fire filling the space. The beasts screamed in fury, their pursuit broken for the moment. James didn't wait to see if they were dead. He dragged Lyra faster, bursting into a vast chamber, the slaughter pits. The room was a nightmare arena. Cages circled the walls, their bars bent and broken. Chains dangled from hooks, and the floor was stained with old blood. At the center stood a huge gate reinforced with thick metal. Behind it, James could hear the muffled roar of something even larger. Lyra froze, her eyes wide with terror. "Not here. Not the pit." James scanned the wall, searching for another way. His gaze landed on a grated ladder leading up toward a platform. Above the platform, a rusted catwalk stretched toward another exit door. "That way," he said, pushing her forward. But as they ran for the ladder, the alarms flared again. Heavy doors opened on the far side of the chamber. Guards stormed in, their weapons glowing with alien energy. James cursed under his breath. "They're hurting us," the guards shouted, their voices echoing as they pointed toward the ladder. Lyra clutched James's arm, her chains rattling.
"We can't fight them all."
James raised his rifle anyway, his eyes burning with defiance. "We don't need to fight them all. Just enough to reach that catwalk." The first guard charged. James fired. The shot dropped him instantly. Sparks flew as more blasts hit the floor around them. James pulled Lyra to the ladder, pushing her upward. "Climb." She hesitated, shaking. "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you, now go." Her glowing eyes lingered on him for a heartbeat, then she obeyed, climbing quickly despite the weight of her chains. James covered her, firing bursts at the advancing guards. His ammo counter dropped lower and lower. One guard's blast struck the ladder, sparks flying. Lyra cried out but held on. James shot the guard through the chest, his rage boiling. "Climb faster!" She reached the platform, pulling herself over. James started up behind her. His boots clanged against the rungs. The guards fired again, one blast searing past his shoulder. From below, the tunnel beasts roared. The explosion hadn't killed them. Now they were clawing their way into the pit. Their glowing eyes reappeared. Wild with hunger, James reached the platform. Gasping for breath, Lyra grabbed his arm, helping him up. The two sprinted across the catwalk, the metal trembling under their weight. The guards fired from below. Beam slicing past, one struck the catwalk, sending a shudder through it. A section of the railing collapsed. James pulled Lyra close, nearly losing balance. They reached the exit door, but it was locked. Heavy sealed, James growled, slamming his shoulder against it. Damn it! Lyra pressed her hands against the lock, her glowing eyes narrowing. Wait, I know this. My family's crest was coded into these doors. Her trembling fingers moved over the panel, pressing symbols James didn't recognize. The panel blinked, then hissed open. The door slid wide, revealing another corridor beyond. James pushed her through, then turned one last time. He saw the beasts burst into the pit, tearing through cages, their roars shaking the chamber. Guards screamed as the creatures turned on them. James slammed the door shut, locking it from the other side. He leaned against the cold metal, his chest heaving. Lyra stared at him, her eyes wide. We should be dead. They will not stop. Not until we are caught. James wiped blood from his cheek, his jaw set. Then let's make them bleed for every step they take. Together, they walked deeper into the unknown corridors. The chase was far from over, but for the first time, James felt like they had more than fear. They had a chance. The corridor stretched ahead like a throat of steel, dim red lights flickering above. James kept his rifle raised, every step echoing off the metal walls. Lyra stayed close behind, clutching her chains to stop them from rattling. For a moment there was silence, no alarms. No footsteps, no growls. It felt too quiet, too empty. James's instincts screamed, trap. He motioned for Lyra to stay low. Keep close. Don't speak. They edged forward until the corridor opened into another chamber. This one was different. The floor was made of cracked stone instead of metal, and torches burned in the corners. Their smoke curled up into a black ceiling. At the center stood an iron gate twice the size of any they had seen before. Chains wrapped around it and strange alien symbols glowed faintly on the surface. Behind the gate something stirred, heavy and slow. Lyra's face drained of color. No, not the trial, James frowned. What trial? Her voice was barely a whisper. Every runaway is sent here. If the beasts do not kill them in the tunnels, this one will. They call it the judgment beast, as if hearing her words. The gate shuddered. Metal groaned. Chains snapped one by one. Then, with a roar that shook the chamber, the gate burst open. The creature that emerged was massive. Its body was covered in dark, armored scales, its arms thick as tree trunks, its head crowned with horns that scraped the ceiling. 2 yellow eyes burned like fire, and when it opened its mouth, rows of jagged teeth glistened in the torchlight. James cursed under his breath. Perfect! The beast slammed a clawed hand into the ground, the impact shaking the floor. Lyra stumbled back, terror in her glowing eyes. You can't fight it. No one survives. James raised his rifle anyway. Then no one's tried hard enough, the beast charged. Its roar deafening, James rolled to the side. Firing into its scales, the bullets sparked but barely scratched the thick armor. The monster swung its arms, smashing a stone pillar into rubble. James ducked behind another pillar. Breathing hard, regular fire isn't enough. He thought, I need to outsmart it. Lyra cried out, its eyes! Go for the eyes. James peeked out, aiming for the glowing yellow orbs. He squeezed the trigger. The shot struck true. One eye burst in a spray of dark fluid. The beast roared in rage, thrashing wildly. It swung its massive arm, striking the pillar James hid behind. The stone shattered, throwing him across the chamber. His rifle skidded across the floor. Sparks flying, Lyra screamed, running to him. James! The beast stomped forward, one eye bleeding but the other locked on its prey. James groaned, forcing himself up. His body ached, but he wasn't done yet. He grabbed a broken chain from the floor. Wrapping it around his arm, Stay back, Lyra, he shouted. But Lyra shook her head, her glowing eyes blazing. I will not leave you! The beast lunged, jaws wide. James rolled under it. Grabbing his rifle on the floor, he shoved the barrel upward into its mouth and fired. The blast echoed like thunder. The creature howled, pulling back, smoke pouring from its throat. Still, it wasn't dead. It staggered, but its fury only grew. It swung again, the strike catching James across the chest, throwing him hard against the wall. His vision blurred, his breath caught. Lyra rushed forward, tears streaming down her face. She picked up a jagged piece of stone and hurled it at the beast. The rock cracked against its wounded eye. The monster bellowed, stumbling. James forced himself to his knees, blood trickling down his arm. He spotted the chain still hanging from the shattered gate. A plan sparked in his mind. Lyra, get to the lever! He shouted, pointing toward a mechanism near the wall. She hesitated. But do it! Trust me! The beast charged again. James sprinted toward the hanging chains. Leaping as its claw swiped past him, he caught the chain and swung around the creature's horn. Wrapping the metal tight, he jumped down, pulling the chain across its throat. Tightening with all his strength, now Lyra threw her weight against the lever. The ceiling above groaned, and heavy iron spikes dropped from the rafters, crashing into the beast's back. The monster roared, thrashing violently. But James pulled harder, the chain cutting deeper, finally with a sickening crack. The beast collapsed, its body shaking the chamber. The torches flickered, then steadied, silence fell. James staggered back, panting, covered in sweat and dust. Lyra ran to him, helping him stand. Her chains rattled as she clutched his arm. You killed it. James gave a faint, grim smile. No, we killed it. Lyra's eyes glistened, her voice trembling. No one has ever survived the beast's trial. They will fear you now, James. They will hunt you harder. James tightened his grip on his rifle, his voice low and steady. Then let them come, but inside, he knew the truth. This fight was only a warning. The slaughterhouse had more horrors waiting, and the real trial had only begun. The chamber was silent after the beast's fall. Smoke drifted through the air, and the floor was littered with broken stone and shattered chains. James leaned heavily on his rifle. His chest heaving, Lyra stood beside him, her glowing eyes wide, almost unable to believe they had survived. But James knew the quiet wouldn't last. The slaughterhouse was alive. Alarms would sound again. Guards would regroup. They had only minutes, maybe seconds. We need to move, James said, his voice hoarse but steady. Lyra nodded, though her steps were shaky. There is no safe place here. They will corner us. They always do. James clenched his jaw. Then we stop running. She stared at him, stunned. Stop running? That is madness. They will send dozens, hundreds. James looked around the chamber, his soldier's eyes scanning for opportunities. He spotted the broken gate, the chains, the shattered pillars, the raised platforms. He began to form a plan. His instinct screamed that retreat was impossible. If they wanted to survive, they had to make a stand. This place is a pit, James said. But pits can become traps. If we turn their own ground against them, we might just live. Lyra shook her head, fear in her voice. I was raised to bow, not to fight. You expect me to battle soldiers who killed my people? James put a hand on her shoulder, firm but gentle. You survived everything they threw at you. That makes you stronger than you think. I'll fight, but I need you too, not as a slave, not as a victim, but as my partner. Her eyes trembled. Then steadied for the first time, she didn't look broken. She looked like someone awakening. Then I will not leave your side, she whispered. Before they could say more, the sound of boots thundered in the corridor. Dozens of guards stormed toward the chamber, armored weapons glowing, their voices roared in unison. James grabbed the fallen chains and wrapped them around one of the pillars. Setting a makeshift trap, he kicked debris into choke points, forcing the guards into narrow paths. He loaded his last few magazines into his rifle, checking every round. The first guard burst into the chamber. Roaring, James fired. The shot echoed, the alien collapsed. The others surged forward, beams of energy slicing through the air. Sparks rained down as the walls burned. Stay behind the pillar. James shouted to Lyra. She obeyed, ducking low. But when a guard climbed over the rubble toward her, she swung her chain like a whip. The iron links cracked against the alien's head. Dropping him to the ground, she stared at her own trembling hands. Shocked she had struck him down, James smirked grimly. That's it. Don't stop now. The chamber erupted into chaos. James fought like a machine, moving between cover, his rifle barking fire. He used the traps he set, pulling chains to collapse stone onto advancing enemies. Each kill bought them a few more seconds, but the guards kept coming. Their numbers seemed endless. Lyra fought beside him, striking with chains, throwing rocks, even pulling one guard off balance so James could finish him. Her fear had turned into fury. Still the pressure built. James's ammo counter dropped lower and lower. Sweat stung his eyes, pain shot through his bruised ribs. He knew this couldn't last forever, finally. A blast struck the floor near him, sending him sprawling. His rifle clattered away. His vision swam, and when he looked up, a massive guard loomed over him, weapon raised. James! Lyra screamed without thinking. She ran forward, wrapping her chains around the guard's arm. Pulling with all her strength, the guard snarled, shoving her back. But the distraction was enough. James lunged for his knife and drove it into the alien's throat. The guard collapsed. Choking, James gasped, pulling himself up. His eyes met Lyra's. She was shaking, her face streaked with sweat and fear, but her eyes burned with something fierce. She had chosen to stand just like him. The chamber floor was littered with bodies, but more guards poured in. The battle wasn't over. James wiped blood from his mouth and tightened his grip on his knife. They want to slaughter? Then let's show them humans don't go quietly. Lyra stood tall beside him, her chains wrapped around her fists. If we fall together. James gave a grim smile. That's the only way I know. The guards circled, their weapons glowing brighter. The air buzzed with energy. The slaughterhouse shook as if it wanted to crush them itself. And yet in the heart of that chamber, one human and one broken alien girl made their stand. James knew this was madness, but madness was all that kept them alive. The chamber shook under the storm of battle. The smell of smoke and blood filled the air. James stood in the center, his body bruised, his rifle almost empty. Lyra beside him with chains wrapped around her arms. Together they faced the last wave of guards. Their enemies circled, shouting in their harsh alien tongue. Sparks flew from the walls as weapons fired. James fired back, every shot precise, each one buying a few more seconds. But soon the rifle clicked empty, silence followed, broken only by the hum of enemy weapons. James dropped the rifle and tightened his grip on his knife. His breath was heavy, his heart pounding. He knew this was the end game. Lyra stepped closer, her glowing eyes blazing with defiance. If they kill us, at least they will know we fought, she whispered. James gave her a tired smile. We're not done yet. The guards charged. But suddenly the chamber lights flickered. Then a deep alarm howled through the slaughterhouse. Louder than anything before, the guards froze, confusion flashing across their faces. From the far end of the chamber, a massive steel door opened, not with the precision of soldiers, but with the fury of something breaking free. Out poured the creatures from the cages, the ones left behind, the ones too weak to be sold but too angry to die. Dozens of aliens, scarred and beaten, rushed into the chamber. Their chains rattled as they roared, throwing themselves at the guards. The slaughterhouse had become a war zone. Lyra's eyes widened. They're fighting back. James grabbed her arm. Then this is our chance, move. They sprinted through the chaos, weaving between battles. Guards clashed with freed prisoners. Claws met steel, screams echoed. The air was thick with smoke and fury. Lyra stumbled, but James pulled her up. Don't stop. They reached a corridor lit by pale blue light. At the far end, a faint glow of the outside world shone through. An exit. But between them and freedom stood one last figure. A towering guard captain, armored head to toe. His weapon crackled with energy. His gaze locked on James and Lyra. You will not leave. The captain growled in broken human tongue. James stepped forward, knife in hand. His body screamed with pain, but his eyes were steady. Try me, the captain charged. His strikes were heavy. Each blow shaking the floor. James dodged, his knife slashing sparks against the armor. The captain swung his weapon, the energy searing past James's shoulder. Lyra screamed, grabbing a broken chain from the ground. She swung it with all her strength, wrapping it around the captain's arm. The guard snarled, jerking to free himself. But James lunged in, driving the knife deep into the gap in the armor. The captain roared, staggering. James twisted the blade, pulling it free. The giant fell to his knees, then crashed to the ground, unmoving, breathless. James looked at Lyra. Come on, before more arrive. They ran together toward the glowing exit. Each step felt heavier, but hope pushed them forward. The doorway grew larger, brighter, until finally they burst out into the open air. For the first time in what felt like forever, James breathed fresh wind. The sun, or whatever star burned above this cursed moon, poured golden light across the barren land. The slaughterhouse loomed behind them, its towers black against the horizon, smoke rising as chaos consumed it. Lyra fell to her knees, tears spilling down her cheeks. She lifted her hands to the light, trembling. I never thought I would see the sky again. James stood beside her. His chest heaving, he looked at her, then at the endless horizon. You're free now, he said quietly. She turned her glowing eyes to him, her voice soft but certain. No, James, we are free because you did not leave me. Because you stayed. He helped her to her feet. His body ached, his wounds burned, but inside, something lighter stirred. He had not just survived. He had given someone else a reason to live. As they walked away from the slaughterhouse, smoke and fire rising behind them, Lyra gripped his hand tightly. Her chains still clinked, but they were no longer the sound of a prisoner. They were the sound of someone who had chosen to stand beside him, Don't leave me, she whispered, the same words she had spoken in the cage. But this time her voice carried no despair, only hope. James squeezed her hand. I'm not going anywhere. The sun rose higher, casting long shadows across the wasteland. Behind them, the slaughterhouse crumbled into chaos. Ahead of them lay uncertainty, danger, maybe even war. But together, they walked toward the dawn, not as a soldier and a slave, not as a human and an alien, but as two souls who refused to be broken. And for the first time, Lyra no longer begged to be used or hurt. She begged only for one thing. Don't ever leave me. James smiled faintly, his voice steady. Never. The dawn stretched wide before them, carrying with it a promise, a new beginning,